Council meeting for December 14, and welcome everyone here, everyone at home. And we're going to start out by going into executive session. So, Eugene Urban Renewal Agency will now meet in executive session.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
It's the City Council, not the Urban Renewal Agency.
Yes, it says urban renewal. Sorry about that. Then I'm going out of the urban renewal back into the City Council. Okay. So the City Council will now meet in executive session held pursuant to ORS 1926602E to discuss the negotiation of real property transactions. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room. right, we're in.
I'm just trying to let a couple people know that we're back. Sarah Maderi, I am the Assistant City Manager, and happy to just start off by also saying we've been doing a lot of work since Monday. We've been doing a lot of work since August, but there is a lot of information in front of you. We don't have to walk through it right now. We tried to email it to you as far in advance as we could, but it answers, I think, all of the questions that were asked on Monday, and we're here to answer those questions. There's some consultants that are also here that can help if we need to go into those details. But I wanted to just say a big thank you in particular to the staff team and to the consultant team for their kind of around-the-clock work to deliver this back in less than 48 hours. And also, generally, as the county did, we would want to say thank you to the county and to our court partners. They've been really excellent to work with. So here we are.
All right, we're ready to launch into discussion. And the first question I'm going to ask, is there anyone who want to take one of the options off the table?
Oh,
I'm asking that, and I'll be glad to call you. Councilor Zelenka.
I'd like to take option C off the table, the butterfly lot.
Is there a second?
What, I'm sorry, which
Who wants to
one?
take the butterfly lot off the
Butterfly
table?
lot.
Is that option C?
Motion?
Is that a motion?
That's not option C. That's,
You didn't. Do you want a motion?
yeah.
Oh, okay. I move to take option C, which is the butterfly
No,
lot.
that's not, is that not option C?
Option C, yes, scenario
Well-
C is City Hall and the butterfly lot.
Yeah, option C on the City Hall on the butterfly lot off the table.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilor Clark. Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I would say in follow-up to what I've heard from one or two of my colleagues, as well as I got the email on all the follow-up information in some of those presentations just an hour and a half ago, and have not had a chance to even look at that email yet, much less read or understand or digest any of that. And so I would say that taking action at this moment is premature for me, certainly. But when it comes to what we did on Monday night, we had a presentation of the information so that at least we could get a better understanding and kind of get some details from the staff on some of that. I would hope that before we start into a heavy discussion about decisions here, we're going to at least have a presentation of some of those items from the staff and give us a chance to walk through it and understand it a little bit. It just seems a little premature for us to go down the decision-making road just yet. Thank you.
The intention from my point of view is to see if you're ready to, not to shortcut discussion that you want to have on the options that you really want to have discussion about, but to see if there's some that you'd like to take off the table so we narrow down what you'd really like to have a discussion about. And Councilor Zelenka has made a motion and seconded to take C off the table. It's not one of those that we're going to spend time talking about. Councilor Brown.
I think it makes better sense to decide whether we want to do option A, B, or C, one of those, or EWEB, and separate those out, because option C is my favorite option. I'd hate to just remove it and, not be able to discuss it anymore. Whereas, the EWEB is a definite either or. I mean, there's two main separation here, and the implications are huge between EWEB and the other three. And so maybe we ought to do that first. That's what I'm suggesting. Because I'll vote against this motion,
Okay.
simply because of just what I stated. It just seems like, let's separate the apples from the orange, and either pick the orange or pick one, and then we can discuss the apples later if we reject the orange. Does that make sense?
You should have let me do the metaphor.
Salad.
Okay. Well, anyway, thank you.
Councilor Pryor.
Yeah, and I can appreciate the desire to try to discuss these holistically, and I think that the effort to say, well, is there something that we could take off early before we begin that discussion. I think it's worth at least exploring to see if there is a way to at least narrow the conversation down. One of the reasons that I think we might want to consider removing C, and I'm saying this with the full acknowledgement that this is the option the county prefers, which I would expect the county to prefer this option. This is the one that gives them the most. And they need to look out for their interests, but I have to look out for the interests of the city. And is this the option that is in the best interests of the city of Eugene? And that's my consideration. One thing we talked about early on was the legal certainty of this site. And right now, at this point, we do not have legal certainty on this site. I mean, we're assured that we would, but we don't. We don't know for sure. And we've already spent money on engineering on the current site. And if we choose this and a court decision goes not in our favor, whatever engineering costs we've spent on this site will have been lost, plus the time and everything else. So I think we were hoping we would have a legal decision, but we don't. And so that is still hanging over the head of this site. Plus, I've said since way back in 2005, when we first started talking about this, one of the most important assets the city of Eugene possesses is this block downtown. It belongs to us, it is our site, and we control it. And we can do what we need or want to do on a site that we own, which has been the site of city government for a long time. And to me, that's an important factor. And so C, while it's in the best interest of other parties and other folks, which is great, is, to me, not necessarily in the best interest of the city of Eugene. So if I were going to remove one in the best interest of the city of Eugene, I would move the site that probably would cost the most and take the most time and require the greatest deal of juggling of those three options. So that's why I would be willing to consider taking that off the table for those reasons.
Claire.Syrett?
Yeah, I would not support removing option C at this time, irregardless of what the County Board of Commissioners decided. I, like Councilor Brown, actually prefer this option in spite of the uncertainties. I think, in my mind, it's the most elegant of the three options for staying downtown and how we use that space, and it keeps the farmers market where it's currently located. So I'd like to keep it on the table for discussion, understanding that we might have to have a backup plan in the event that the court does not agree that we could build our city hall there.
Councilor Evans?
Thank you, Mayor. Narrowing options at this time is making me feel a little claustrophobic. I really think that I'm with Councilor Clark here. I think that we need some time to digest the information that we just received over the last day and a half so that we can complete analysis around all four of these options and be able to make, decisions and judgments and decisions that are in the most prudent interest of the city. This is a huge decision, and making a decision at this point, I think, could be hasty, even though we've been down this road for years and years and years. I think that there are other opportunities that we have within the context of these options and also outside of these options that warrant us to have just a little further time for conversation, consultation, and deliberation.
Councilor Taylor?
Thank you. I will not vote for this motion. I think option C is the best choice, so I certainly wouldn't vote to take it off the table. Thank you.
And Councilor Zelenka?
I'll remove my, withdraw my motion, if that's okay with a second.
C stays on the table.
But I do not favor delaying a decision on this process. We've studied this to death. I have more than enough information to make this decision. If we delay this, we lose the mayor and Councilor Brown's experience and knowledge and continuity with this process, and we basically start over with two new people. they're very capable people, but will take them a while to get up to speed, and we're going to add months to this process. And time is money when this actually on this project. So I prefer having them on board when we make this decision, and let the new people come on to the council, and the new mayor come on to the city with a clean slate, ready to move forward. So we've been walking around this for a long time, and I think we've got enough information and to move forward with a decision.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor.
Anywhere?
Sorry, George, I didn't see you.
Okay.
I'm happy
go
to
ahead.
have, okay. I guess I would say that certainly it's true that the mayor and Councilor Brown have invested an awful lot of time and effort in the process of us going through this. I would say, as someone who in this year went through another campaign, I heard other candidates who will be seated at this table come January speak on this subject knowledgeably and quite a bit, actually. So I have full confidence in both the fact that they've both just recently been voted on, and their support of the people who voted for them, and as well as their thoughts on the matter and their education on the matter. I don't think that's a delay of any kind. I suppose I would say to my friend Chris too that never in the history of our city has the city hall been in the same place when it's been replaced. And each time we've done it, it's been in a new place every single time. But I would also say that there were a number of questions that I asked on Monday night, some of which had to do with conflicting information that we had. Many of us haven't even read the answers provided by staff yet, much less had an opportunity to drill down on it. I had information directly from eWeb, for example, to be more specific about what I said earlier, that was quite at odds with what was presented to us from the architects and from their analysis, and that's not because of their work. That's because the original information they started with from eWeb changed by the time it got to us in that direct memo that we had on Monday night. So we haven't had a chance to drill down on some of that data and understand what the truth of it is. Some of us have suggested some numbers, and some of us have suggested other numbers, and we certainly don't have agreement on that, much less good solid facts. So I would consider it worthy of a little more discussion.
Councilor Foley.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to apologize to a number of people that sent me emails, called me, left me voicemails. I've had a real busy schedule this morning, and I just haven't had to return them all. But I have read them. I've listened to the comments, and I will take that into consideration. I would have liked to have removed scenario C off the board. After attending the Board of Commissioners meeting, there's some real compelling arguments as to why C works best for the county and the state. Having moved jurors around, having moved prisoners around, having to move through the court system, there's a lot of security concerns and proximity concerns, a lot of other items that people every day don't know about. And option C is, I think, the best option for the entire county, the citizens of the entire population of the county, to make sure that we have a secure and a functionable court system. But since it's back on the table, I'll go ahead and have that discussion. Some people have questioned whether or not moving the City Hall to the e-website would be abandoning our efforts in downtown. To me, it looks like that all we're doing is actually expanding our efforts in downtown. And I was talking to Claire about this earlier. If we were to choose the e-website for our new City Hall, I kind of look like that as a Kickstarter similar to the LCC filling one of the pits, because that's what it took to get everything else going. In my opinion, if we were to move to the eWeb property, perhaps it would get the riverfront redevelopment going also. So there is a lot of new information that we just got based on the meeting Monday night and the open session or the open house yesterday. I personally would like to go ahead and make a decision before the first of the year. You know, we've done this enough times. I'm tired of dragging it on and on and on because every day is costing us more and more money in the long run. I would like, at the end of the day, for us to walk out of here with some sort of definite decision on one of the scenarios or the EWEB
Do
property.
you want to put a motion out?
Excuse me?
Do you want to put a motion out for a scenario? Or discussion?
Not at this point.
Okay.
I think there's enough time left that maybe some answers can be, or questions could be addressed and some of the answers given in the meeting.
Go ahead, Councilor Zelenka, and then Councilor Brown.
Yeah, of the options in front of us, the four options in front of us, my least favorite is the EWEB option for several reasons. One, I believe that we're abandoning downtown when we move to the EWEB site, just when the downtown is getting turned around. And when I'm in the EWEB site, I don't feel like I'm downtown. I know other people don't feel like they're downtown, and we've got a plethora of emails and phone calls about people from downtown who don't think that's downtown. Beside the railroad tracks and the viaduct, it really separates it from the rest of downtown. So that's one of the reasons. I think it's the most expensive upfront cost of all the options by several $1 million, and we might even be underestimating the cost. To me, my personal experience of all the projects I worked on in my career in my house is that remodels cost more. They're not cheaper. People don't remodel to do it cheaper. They remodel it because they like the location. I don't necessarily like the location. And if we just moved into the 25,000 square foot first floor only and mothballed the rest of the building, but we wouldn't just sit there and let that all be mothballed for a very long time. What we'd have an obligation and a desire and pressure to build out that. That would be the whole point of picking the EWEB site, is to build that project out. So if we started to go down that road, we would then end up spending most of our capital improvement project monies for the entire city on those build-outs of the EWEB City Hall, instead of doing other facility remodels or fixing pools or doing that. That would eat up all of our capacity, I think, and I don't think that's a wise decision. And that would probably go on for maybe 5 to 7 years. So, and then in that facility, where we put the council chambers, especially if it were in the south building, would be very problematic, I think. We'd just be cramming it in there. If we did it on the north side, that's problematic too, because I really don't know the cost of doing that and whether or not it would actually work. Another reason for not liking the EWEB site is it further disperses the city staff. We're fairly compact. People can walk between the buildings. Moving out to the EWEB site makes it a full 8 miles. I think people wouldn't, it's not that they wouldn't walk or they couldn't go to those meetings, but I think it impacts the ability to do communication and have meetings. I also think that this site isn't very accessible for walking, biking, and bus. And if a private developer were to develop it, would go back in the tax rolls. And then finally, I think a civic center where you have the state, county, and the city all in the center is very important to have that be in the heart of the town and not disperse it. So for all those, I would not like the EWEB site. My actual preference would be option B.
Councilor Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. It's kind of ironic when I first got on the council and started studying and attending meetings 8.5 years ago, almost 9 years. I was reading books about cities and redeveloping and what makes places work and what makes places fail. And sometimes the plans don't work out and places slip into further decline rather than being regenerated. A few years ago, a man named William White wrote this really cool book called Rediscovering the Center, Social Life of Small Urban Spaces. One of his colleagues and pupils, they were hired by the city of New York to study streets and street life and any public space. And I don't mean just government buildings, but any public space. one of his colleagues and students founded the Project for Public Space. And I'm really eagerly looking forward to their report in February. They do great work. And some of the recommendations, they're so simple that they sound counterintuitive. What attracts people to a space, a public space? It's other people. Other people do. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's true. And what we would do if we moved to eWeb is we are removing people from a space that's just starting to be successful again. And that's like the complete opposite of what we want to do. And I agree with Councilor Zelenka that, you remove people over there. Now they're on the periphery. They're not in the center anymore. I mean, here we have if we picked B or C, my personal favorite is C. Now we've got a great opportunity to create a wonderful public space, civic space, the government space, all within close proximity of each other, the state, the feds, buildings, the county, and the city, and farmers market. And this could be a really wonderful regeneration of this part of town. And I will tell you that, you remove a few hundred people from walking around on the streets here in the center. City staff is always out walking around. They're taking breaks at the coffee shops and tea houses, having lunch in the restaurants or the food carts. They're interacting with other people who are also downtown, and that will attract more people. These guys' research for years have shown that. And if you reverse that trend, then you are you're taking away from public life in our downtown. And I just like to say that, the eWeb buildings are both being used now. It hasn't attracted any development. Thank you.
Councilor Clark, and then Councilor Fryer.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a habit in the last many years of a sort of civil discussion that I've actually been very proud that we've kind of evolved into. So I don't mean to be, I don't mean to break that or act in contradiction to that, but I have to respond to my friend Councilor Zelenka to say that the notion that the eWeb option will be more expensive than any of these other options, A, B, or C, is simply untrue. It's just simply not true. And the fact that we can't delineate that at this moment with facts, and it's just opinions, is the reason not to decide today. Because we're sitting here saying, it's my opinion, it's this, it's your opinion, it's that, which to me says we need more facts and more homework from staff. Because we don't know the answer to that. I can make all the arguments in the world about why that's not true. I've been doing that for a while. I can say, for example, that none of the improvements you mentioned all need to be done at once. They can be done over time, but they don't cost anywhere near as much as the initial report we got. And so it's not going to be anywhere near the cost. It doesn't affect the capital budget on an ongoing basis. And that as a result, we get over three times as much space for less money. I can make the arguments about every single downtown plan that the city of Eugene has, every single one that we've been doing for decades, lists the e-website as a part of downtown. Every one. Every bit of planning that we've been doing for decades is about our return to the river. Every bit of it. So to say that it's somehow not part of downtown is just a silly notion. For us to make this decision today sounds to me, from what I'm hearing, like a 4-4 split with the mayor breaking the tie. And I'm sorry, but I don't believe that's the way you make a 40, 50, 60-year decision. I think you make it with a greater percentage of understanding after you've deliberated a little bit longer, even though it has taken us forever to do this. I think that's a bad way to make a decision this important. So I will sit here as long as it takes to argue the fact that the eWeb site is the wisest choice for our downtown. It's the least expensive. It's the most forward-thinking and not backward-looking. But I don't believe we're ready as a body to make this decision today. And I have many questions for you if we are.
Councilor Pryor?
The optimist in me believes that any one of these four options can be made to work. Absolutely. We can make them work. I believe this community has the ability to make any one of these four options work. I remember there was one of the managers of the Portland Trail Blazers when they were talking about obstacles to getting things done. Why couldn't we win? Why couldn't we do this? And he said, you can do anything you want if you have the will to do it and you know what it is that it takes to get it done. So I'm coming back to that. What would it take to accomplish these? And if we had the will, we can find whatever it is it takes to make any of these options work. So I'm confident that we haven't been somehow led down a wrong path in terms of these options. So a consideration for me is how much longer we need to keep talking. We've been talking in some form or another for decades, and about this particular situation for years. And without reaching some kind of a decision soon, I could imagine 2 years from now, we'll still be sitting here at this table saying, well, which one of the options should we choose? And it may be a different set of options and there may be different conditions, but we'll still be talking about making a choice because it's a tough choice. And if there's a way to delay making it, we'll sure figure out, because that's what we want to do, is to not make the choice, not to have to make the choice. But we do have to make the choice. We owe it to the city to make the choice. And I think saying, well, I just need more information, or I need to have more conversation, or I need to wait, is just another way to drag out not having to make the decision. And I think coming up with additional, questions and 11th hour opportunities, there'll always be a new opportunity. There will always be new questions. Of that, I am sure. And in a year from now, we'll still be having people coming up with new opportunities and new options and new questions and new needs. And reasonable people should consider that. But at some point, even reasonable people need to say, okay, I have to now make a decision. And I think that's the place we're at now. Because if we keep going like we're going now, we will never make this decision. We will talk about it and talk about it because that's a very comfortable thing to do. And I think we need to step outside our comfort zone and actually make a decision. Whichever one we choose, I'm fine with, I'll live with, and I know we have the ability to make any one of these options work. So I guess I'm just saying let's choose something and go forward.
Claire.Syrett?
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate the discussion, and obviously there's many variables that we have to consider. And I think things to commend our various options, and we've worked really hard to try and discern what the best way forward is to get the most value from the public's dollar, which I think is the high priority. I would actually be okay with postponing a decision since I've been sidelined over the last few months and unable to be a robust participant in this discussion. So I'm happy to be here today to add my voice to it again. I was an early supporter of the e-website as a future city hall, and I'm very glad that we did more due diligence regarding that option because it gave us some really important pieces of information about the pros and cons of that site. And it ended up pointing out some real challenges with the building that I wasn't aware of before. So frankly, it's caused me to be much less supportive of that as an option for us. It's an older building than I thought it was. And is going to need more retrofitting than I'm comfortable with given the uncertainty that represents in terms of costs and requirements. I've reconsidered some of my prior opinions about the accessibility to the site and believe it's not sufficiently accessible to the public for those who rely on transit. Given that we routinely have more than 24 people attending our meetings, even on cold, dreary nights, really speaks to the importance of our city hall being relatively easy to access for those who want to participate in person with this body. And then the issue of where to place a council chamber and what kind of physical space we could create there, that was a really important piece of information that came up in the most recent discussions that I listened in on that I had not been aware of. And I think being able to create a viable council chamber that really reflects our values and our specific needs is very important. And I think there's some real constraints and limitations inherent in that current infrastructure that would be very challenging for us to overcome. And then I do still worry about what we can afford in terms of building our own building, but building our own building will give us more control over those costs than moving into a building and assuming whatever liabilities are there in that existing building. And, you know, the design that our architects brought us for our City Hall on the current City Hall website, I thought was very beautiful and elegant, and I'm prepared to give them the assignment of bringing that design to a place for us that fits our budget if we go with one of the downtown options. So that's where my thinking is right at this moment.
I've got Councilor Evans and then Councilor Clark. I just thought, listening to you all and the discussions in particular between B and C, is that if the majority wanted to go in the direction of C, if it's possible, you could put a motion together of doing that if it's possible with the backup of going to option B, and just for you to consider as one way of putting that those wishes together. Councilor Evans.
Oh, I appreciate everyone's input and comments around this, but as of Friday, I agreed to co-author a opinion piece, a letter that went into the Register Guard on Monday with Councilors Clark and Poling supporting the eWeb option. That's based on information that I had up until that point, which made eWeb a very attractive option, in my opinion. We also, on Monday, asked for additional information about eWeb and other options that we are presented with currently. So today, 47 minutes ago, on my desk here, or table here, I've got 20 plus pages of additional information that we requested Monday night of analysis. There's analysis here for a second floor City Hall, City Council chamber option, a fourth floor City Council chamber option within the eWeb site. There are multiple pieces of information and analysis that we requested about price, about other considerations in terms of remodeling, all of which I have had exactly 47 minutes, and I haven't had any of that time to be able to read and digest and make, a complete analysis of what my position would be in terms of moving forward. I suggest that, speaking only for myself, that 47 minutes, and I haven't had a chance to read this, for me to move forward with any kind of decision would be inappropriate. It would not represent the best interest of my Ward 6 constituency or my broader constituency of the city of Eugene. Mm-hmm. To be asked to do that is to ask me to be irresponsible. And I'm not going to be irresponsible in a major 50-year decision. I have had conversations with other members of the community last night, this morning, on other, issues regarding location and proximity, and all were very good, fruitful discussions. My time's up.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you. To take off on the same line of thinking, I would say that I am sorry that my friend Claire has not been here for some of the discussions or a part of some of the things I've seen in my experience. But I will tell you that we can have that space and a beautiful city council chamber on either the second floor of the north building or the fourth floor of the south building, and still come in with 86,000 square feet, the chamber done, and the building energy efficient for less money than we're talking about spending for phase one of any of these other options. It is doable. And the fact that we don't agree on the facts as they sit on the ground is reason not to make a decision today. It seems quite forced to me. There's another part of this that we're brushing aside as if it doesn't matter. And I can't stress this enough. Neither options A, B, or C provide any plan for phase two. So I'll go one step farther and say, as I have, I believe that the choice of A, B, or C means that we will never consolidate City Hall again. We will never have the money to do that, ever. It's over $100 million, and I don't believe the public would support, bonds or otherwise, any way to finance the building of anything other than a council chamber, and I think they would call that an irresponsible decision as well. But I agree with my friend Greg that we have had this information in order to try and reconcile these different bits of information for a very short period of time, with no ability for me to either read it or dissect it and find out which parts I know or have questions about or don't. It's an irresponsible thing to decide at this moment. Secondarily, I would say this. I caution everybody when it comes to polls involved in politics because, you know, one person's poll can turn out differently than another. And our public outreach process got some good information from the 25 people who showed up yesterday. But I challenge anybody in this room to tell me that you don't think if you put this question to the people of Eugene that they'd choose UWeb. I saw a poll that said 3-1. 3-1. That's their preference. So I would suggest to you that it's worth not angering the community that much for us to have better facts before we make a decision.
Thank you. I think we have plenty of facts. I think we've taken way too much time. As for putting it to a vote, if we had put it to a vote, we would have kept what we had, but we can't do that now. I think it would be really irresponsible for us to abandon downtown. We've tried to get everyone to stay downtown, and that is of paramount importance to me. Also, being, as I've said all this before, but being near the county, close proximity is very important, and accessible to poor people as well as other people is very important. And the eWeb site is not accessible to people who are not totally fit or who don't have cars. It's not a good place to walk out of after dark and try to get to a bus or try to get a wheelchair somewhere. I think my choice is to eliminate that, and my choice is option C, if it's possible, with B as a backup if it's not possible. And it goes along with cooperating with our other governments, which I think is a good thing. And making it, and with the farmers market, which is one of the very best things we have in this city. And the farmers market people would like us to do option C, and that, I don't think we want to move the farmers market over to some corner of behind a city hall and behind a possible courthouse. Thank you.
Councilor Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. You know, it's true. A lot of people, we get emails, and I see people every day at my place of employment. And it's true, as Councilor Clark said, a lot of people favor the eWeb. And I can see what the attraction is. However, once I explained to them that we've received financial information and square footage information, that it's really going to, the cost of many of these options is actually pretty close. I mean, I explained that to them, and I explained how it will diminish downtown, the vitality and street life of downtown that we have now will not increase it, it will diminish it. And the fact that there's, no public transportation anywhere 2 or 3 blocks away, I think. Maybe at the Fifth Street Public Market, there's a bus stop. And then you have to walk from there over the train tracks and hang a ride at the old Midgley's Glass, and then slog down that street into the overpass and make your way through the parking lot. And then they go, well, that doesn't sound all that good. And so I think with option C gives us, with B as the backup, I think option C is really, that's the one the commissioners like. And, we, B and C, we have to work with them on this. And it's just an opportunity to create this wonderful civic space in the center. Permanent arrangement for the farmers market and Saturday market. That will be a really nice thing. And the proximity of all the government buildings. It's true, Councilor Zelenka earlier mentioned that, current city staff now is going to have to go all the way across downtown over to this area that's a little difficult to access. And whereas here, people have to walk over from the atrium. That's what, 3 blocks, 4 blocks? Well, it's going to be a lot longer. They have to drive probably. I can't see people walking over there. It'll be an inconvenience for staff. And then just removing these bodies of staff from the central area is a terrible mistake. And I will guarantee you that if the Project for Public Spaces is aware of that plan, they will say absolutely not. That's like a cardinal sin. You don't do that when you're trying to revitalize a place, because people attract people, and you remove people, you've removed part of the attraction of wanting to come downtown. So, thank you.
Councilor Zelenka?
Yeah, all the polls said Hillary is going to win too. So I don't have much faith in polls anymore. Delay is often a tactic of folks that don't see things going their way. I think we've got enough information to move forward. Most of the additional information that we got is actually around eWeb, and as it looks like eWeb does not have a majority council support, that info is kind of moot at this point. What I did say about the eWeb cost, though, is I believe that the upfront cost of the eWeb building is most likely to be the most expensive of all the options, and that's especially when you consider the acquisition cost plus what the experts told us would cost to move in. Regardless of the cost, I don't think that that's a good idea, because we'd be abandoning downtown. We'd give up on the concept of a civic center. We'd be eating up our capital needs to build out the rest of the building. The council chamber is very problematic, and the further dispersal of staff is problematic. And then finally, the accessibility of that space is not what I think a city hall needs to be. So staying downtown to me is a better path for the city. I'm not holding my breath for a phase 2 city hall. When I got on the council 10 years ago, we had that plan. It was $120 million 10 years ago, and we killed it because it didn't have any support. And that's why we ended up doing let's pay for what we can, build it out on a smaller scale, and then work to get other parts built as we can. So that's the path that we took, and I agree with that completely. My preference would be option B with the city hall as it's currently designed with a wraparound courthouse, but but I can count 2, and option C seems to be favored. I can live with that. My fear about option C is that if we start to embark on the butterfly lot and we sell the whole city block to the county, it's a $200 million building with $100 million they have to come up with at the county level. And I just have a hard time seeing how that is really going to take place in a very short period of time. And if they're successful, and I'd vote for it, but if they were successful, I think it takes a lot of time and effort. And we end up having a pit or another lot downtown for a decade is very problematic to me. So that's why I preferred option B. But I can count. So I'll make a motion to move to direct the city manager, this is option C, move to direct the city manager to begin negotiations with Lane County over the possible purchase of a portion of the butterfly lot for City Hall and offer to sell to Lane County the City Hall site contingent on the city being able to commence construction of a phase 1 of City Hall and the butterfly lot with a backup option of option B with City Hall on the City Hall site with a potential courthouse.
Second.
Wraparound.
Moved and seconded. I've got Counselor Clark, Counselor Poling.
Well,
Syrett.
I can count 2. Apparently, my ability to count changes depending on the day. Which is interesting because I think it probably will change tomorrow, too. A reason why we might want to reconsider the idea of taking more time to think about this. But that said, we need to be clear about the fact that we're telling our community that we're never going to build phase 2. I've heard my friend Alan say that. And that that's his assumption. I don't believe that we will ever find a way to afford that and thus have only a council chamber and rent space around town as our city's future from this point forward. I think that's a bad decision. Number 2, to assume we have B as a backup plan is, in my opinion, an irresponsible option for us to say out loud, knowing what we know about the county. They've already said they don't want to participate in that option. So that's not a real option that will happen. It's not a backup plan at all. And between those 2 reasons, we're underserving our community, I think, if we believe that only the council chambers and the manager's office is the only thing that constitutes a city hall. And that's all we ever need built, because that's exactly what this choice is. Thank you.
I've got Counselor Poling.
Thank you. I agree with the motion as far as option C is concerned, but what kills it for me, and I'd have to vote against the motion, is what Mike brought up earlier. And to be more exact, I think the comment we received in our meeting about option B was, if you choose the option B, it's a no-go and you're on your own from the county and the courts. The funding for the courts is on a very tight timeline. Listening to today's Board of Commissioners meeting, it appears that the Lane County is on the short list to receive that funding. So for us to do something that allows option C, which is the county's preference, would be in our interest to move forward. But without a clear backup option for us, I don't know where we're going to go. Before we put a motion out to study all these different options, one of the things was that we had a court ruling on the deed restrictions. As we know, that came back from the judge that ruled on that as well. We can't give you on our deed restriction until you go down the road to a certain point. The conversation I heard from my fellow counselors at that time is, we don't want to go down that road to this point unless we get a clear opinion on the deed restrictions. So where are we on that? We're right back where we started from. There was some discussion about LTD. Well, I've been on the EMX steering committee for 14 years. There have been changes in bus stops all over the city. So to say that people can't get to the e-website because the bus stops too far away, that's changeable. It's an easy change. We can talk with LTD. Again, it would take some cooperation with some of our partners, but I'm sure that can happen. So I cannot vote for the motion that Alan's put out, primarily because of the backup plan B is a no-go for the county.
Counselor Syrett, and then Brown, and then Pryor, and then Zelenka.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure I am part of the reason for renumbering of votes because I changed my position on eWeb from what I had been broadcasting in the past. But again, that was with new information and new consideration about all the pros and cons of that site. So I still think there's a lot of value there. But I think on balance, staying downtown is important. And I just want to say we can't know everything that the future holds. As a wise member of the public told us at our Monday night meeting, past civic leaders dedicated buildings in full confidence that they were meeting future needs, and then future city councilors came and tore those buildings down. So any of these choices means giving up something else that we might think is of value. We are forced to make trade-offs without having certainty about the success of any one of them. And the deed restriction decision will apply to the county's choice of scenarios too. So they're going to be in the same boat should that decision torpedo their plan to go with option C. They're going to have to come up with a contingency. So I can support this motion as it's been put out.
Councilor Brown?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I mean, but here's the thing. If the county, let's say option C doesn't get the judicial validation, I believe that it will. Reading the history, the exhaustive, very detailed history that legal staff at the county did of the history of the Mulligan donation and the Skinner donation, I'm convinced that this is a legal and appropriate thing to do. But I'm not the judge, but the indications are that that's not going to be a hang-up. He just wanted to see a kind of a done deal and serious negotiation proposal before he felt he couldn't even rule on it because he didn't know what he was ruling on. So that'll change. But let's just say that that doesn't happen, and then the county doesn't like option B. I don't either. But what choice would they have then if they didn't locate on our old city hall lot? Tear down the butterfly lot and build a multi-story there. That would be one choice. The other, because they would have to do that. That would be their only choice because they can't tear down the existing courthouse and somehow go into hibernation for a couple of years until the new one gets built and then move back in. It has to be ready for them to move out of. So the butterfly lot would be their only option, which I think is the least successful from civic utilization of civic space of the options. So how about this? I'd just like to make a suggestion to the proposer and the second of the motion. Why don't we just remove the part about option B? Because in reality, that would be my preference, but in reality, it would be A or B if C doesn't fly for some reason because of denial of judicial validation. And does that make sense? I mean, why not just remove B?
This motion, I think, is very clear. It says it is option C. Right. Unless the judge rules against us. Then we have to have a fallback.
Yes, I understand.
And so what the add-on does is it gives clear direction to the city, to the staff as to what would be where we would go if the judge rules against us, and that would be option B. It takes off the table eWeb and the other options. That's why I would prefer to leave it on.
Glenn has something.
Betty has to.
So just what I think what the two of you are saying is sort of going across each other. I believe what George is saying, and that I agree with, is if it turns out that that the butterfly lot is unavailable, then under this scenario, you wind up building City Hall on the City Hall site. It could be that the county says, we're not interested in a wraparound, in which case you're really back to A at that point. So if what your intent is to say, if we're unable to build on the butterfly lot, our intent, the council's intent is to build on the City Hall site, the county then can do whatever it's going to do.
That's what I meant to say. So that's a better way to do it.
I think that's what I'm trying to say too.
Do I just modify the motion to?
So you don't actually, the original way option C was written that was the intent of it, because the second half of that option C motion is to offer to sell to the county contingent on the city actually being able to commence construction of phase 1 on the Butterfly lot. Implicit in that is if we're not able to build on the Butterfly lot, then we're not offering to sell the entire block to the county.
Well, given past history about how these things have gone work, I think it should be explicit. So what would the language be that if we're not able to do that, then the city hall would be built on the existing city hall lot?
Right. So what you added to the end of what's written on your sheet would be with a backup option to locate city hall on the existing city hall site, period.
Okay.
And who's your second?
Mine was, yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, there you go.
Well, I still have a few seconds left. My intention there was to, I think this is good. This is what I think we're both mean.
Yeah.
And the idea was to remove the objection that Councilor Polling had to kind of just like saying, well, if we can't do C, then it's got to be B. That was kind of what the motion was implying. And so if we remove that, then perhaps one or more councilors might be able to support the motion.
I've got Councilor Pryor,
Thank you.
Zelenka, Clark, and Polling in the queue, and then maybe we'll take a vote.
Okay.
Councilor Pryor.
Yeah, I can accept this as an opportunity, primarily because it gets us to a decision, which I think is good. And I think it could work. As I said, this option could work. And I agree with the changes because I would imagine the only reason why we wouldn't follow through with option C would be because of a legal decision. Which would remove it anyway. And so the fallback would not be necessarily a specific option, but would be the intention to go back to the City Hall lot. And so I view this motion as having a front half, which is a commitment, our commitment to C. That's what we would decide today, to commit to C, which parallels the county's decision to commit to C. There's a certain synergy there. But the second half is not really a commitment, but more of an intention because it's contingent. And so I think having it as an intention to move back sends a message of what we want to do, but it wouldn't necessarily bind the council. The future council would have the ability to modify that or tweak it or do whatever they want to do. But I would support this because the front half is the commitment to say, okay, let's go ahead and go with option C.
Councilor Zelenka.
Yeah, I agree. This is consistent with what the county did. It does adopt option C, but I just wanted to be clear about, so what if the court, I wish I had $5 for every time a lawyer told me they were absolutely certain this is going to be the way that the court rules, and that didn't happen that way. So there is a possibility that the judge could rule that the Butterfly lot and the deeds don't allow us to build there. If they don't, then we're kind of back into where we're building City Hall where we are today. So this clearly indicates that option C is where we're going, and that if we don't, then we're going back to having City Hall where we proposed it just recently. And if the county never is able to come up with the money and build the courthouse, then option A becomes on the table again, where we could potentially build phase 2, part of option A about our facilities. Our phase 2 could be behind the City Hall if we ended up back there and do something else with the remainder of the lot. So it's really about getting us clear direction, giving clear direction to the staff about and the community about where we're heading.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. Number one, to take off on something that Chris was saying that I think was important was that I hear this motion as the intent to give the manager direction and with an informed piece about what this particular council at this moment thinks about any other option. I wouldn't suggest to you necessarily that it precludes the eWeb option as a secondary option. And one of the most primary reasons is that when we get to that point, we're going to have different people at the table. And this all we're doing is giving the manager direction here. We're not passing an ordinance that needs reconsideration. A new council could make an entirely different decision. And even this decision clear could be different when we come back in January, because we don't have full information right at this moment. I've heard two of my colleagues make pretty strong statements about what we know, but I've heard two other colleagues say that we haven't even read the answers yet, much less understood them. So we don't have clear information, and a different council can come to an entirely different decision completely logically. So this is clearly a forced decision in timing. And I think it's very unwise of us, because we're going to give the city of Eugene a further black eye if for whatever reason we discover something new on January 11th and make an entirely new decision. So I'd also like to see us not give out some manner of intention as if that binds a future council as well. But most strongly of all, I would urge us to be cautious here. This decision is a plain statement that we're going to have a limited and small city hall for our future. And I think our community is worth more than that. I think it is more than that, and that we can do more than that. And I don't think we're giving ourselves the chance to.
Councilor Pauling?
Could I get a restatement of the motion, please?
It would be in full. I move to direct the city manager to A, begin negotiations with Lane County over the possible purchase of a portion of the Butterfly Lot for City Hall, and B, offer to sell to Lane County the City Hall site, contingent on the city being able to commence construction of Phase 1 of City Hall on the Butterfly Lot, with a backup option to locate City Hall on the existing City Hall site.
So if this motion were to pass and the city, or the county, excuse me, for some reason fails to or cannot purchase the existing City Hall site, then basically we're back to where we started several months ago with building the City Hall Phase 1 and Phase 2 on the City Hall site. Is that what would happen as a result of that?
No.
So if the county for some reason decided they couldn't build the courthouse on the existing City Hall site, my guess is that they would be unwilling to sell to us the Butterfly Lot, in which case ultimately we get to, yes, we would be back on that unless the council at that time said do something different. Just to be clear, since somebody raised, let's be clear about intent. The intent of this is to give the manager the authority to go negotiate, but he'll have to come back to the council with the deal that you either say is okay or is not okay. So this is direction to go negotiate, but then it's coming back to you. So in that sense, sorry, but this is not your final decision on the City Hall.
And I think we're ready to vote. George, are you through? Okay, all right. We're voting on Councilor Zelenka's motion. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In opposition, 3. It passes. And with that, we are finished with this discussion for today. And then I think Greg wanted to.
Mayor, since this is your final city council meeting, I'd like to read the following statement in appreciation of your 12 years as mayor of our fair and lovely city. Mayor Piercy has served the citizens of this community for 12 years with courage, commitment, and good humor. During that time, she has presided over almost 1,100 council meetings, work sessions, public hearings, workshops, community forums, and joint elected officials meetings. Mayor Piercy has been tireless in her efforts to improve the lives of who all live in this community by working to advance legislation and initiatives that protect the environment, strengthen the economy, and help the disenfranchised and vulnerable. Most notable of her accomplishments during the tenure, Mayor Piercy's tenure, include the Climate Recovery Ordinance, many human rights initiatives and resolutions, homeless initiatives that are now used as models for programs across the country, steady leadership through local recession and organizational budget reductions, downtown development, including capital projects and business initiatives, participation on national and international panels to address global issues, expansion of passenger rail service, and other alternative modes of transportation. Thank you, Mayor Piercy, for your leadership and your friendship throughout these 12 years. You have shown us all the power of optimism, inclusiveness, resilience, and cooperation. Thank you, Mayor Piercy, and enjoy your retirement.
Thank you very much.
And I don't have anything prepared, and it's to my remiss for Councilor Brown, but I think personally, and I think
You're forgiven.
to speak on behalf of the rest of our colleagues, as well as I know staff, that we deeply appreciate your insightful commentaries, your diligence with doing your homework around many, many, many issues over the last 8 years. And personally, George, I appreciate your mentorship and your friendship. For when I came on council, it really helped me in making a large adjustment. So thank you very much. Thank both of you.
Yeah, George, I just wanted to say I'm going to miss you on the council. I've very much appreciated your thoughtfulness and your thoroughness. Sometimes your thoroughness annoyed me, but you were very thorough about stuff. And just you were so steadfast in what you thought and what you believed, and I always knew where you stood, and you brought a very unique perspective to the council. I always appreciated learning from your perspective that informed mine and made mine my decisions better. So thank you very much. I'll miss you on the council. Mayor, I've enjoyed working with you quite a long time, and your mentorship and all the fun we've had, and also decisions that we made. So I'll miss you on the council as well. Thank you for being mayor for forever, 12 years.
Thank you. I too wanted to say thank you to Mayor Piercy, whose skill at this job is renowned, certainly. For the entire service I've had on the council for the last 10 years, you've been the only mayor that I served with. And I have admired many of the things that you've done as mayor. Certainly, foremost among them, from my perspective, is your accessibility. You are quite simply everywhere and easy for people to reach out and connect to. And I think that's a really important part of that job. And I think you've done it exceptionally well. And you certainly have dedicated your life to serve the public. It's obvious and evident. And I admire you for the work that you've done. To my friend George, I would say that today, again, is proof that you and I almost never vote together on so many things. We have recently in the last year or two, but we often come down on different sides of things. But I admire your work as well. I don't think I've ever seen a city councilor do as much homework as you do. I don't think I've ever seen anyone do as much in-depth analysis of what kind of things are involved in our decisions as you do. And as I've said to many people for a very long time, although my friend George and I might disagree at this table, I'd let him watch my children because I trust him as a person, and he's a good man. So I appreciate your service as well.
Thanks, Mike.
I'm going to call on Chris, but I did want to say to you, Councilor Clark, that we have never lacked for a sense of humor between the two of us.
Yes, ma'am.
I think it carries you over many bumpy roads along the journey, and I appreciate that very much, very much. Yes.
We actually started together. You and I were elected at the same time, so we actually have served together the whole 12 years. And probably for me, one of your biggest legacies is something we talked about early on when we were first elected and hadn't yet even taken our seats, was to create an environment and a culture on the city council that was one of collegiality and respect and thoughtfulness and deliberation. And I think over the 12 years we have accomplished that in spades. And neither you or I can take full credit. It was the entire council that does it. But I think it is a legacy, and it is something that hopefully we will carry forward into a new administration. I'm confident that we will. And if you examine just today, the discussion and the issues we dealt with today on the Richter scale of city business is probably a 10. And yet we made it through. Passions were evident, of course, but we made it through, and we made it through in a way like lawyers do, who slug it out in the courtroom and then go and have a beer later. That always, to me, was the mark of focusing on the issue and not the people. And I admire the fact that that was an important issue for you, just as it is for us. And I think that marks a good, collegial, effective organization, and a lot of the credit for that goes to you. So thank you very much for that. And the same goes for Councilor Browne, who brings his perspectives and his beliefs and his issues. And what I've always admired is the fact that you maintain the decorum and the collegiality that this body values so much. And I think that's very important, and I admire you for that as well.
Most of the time.
And I would just say that I've always had I have deep respect for each of you, because I think you each care deeply about your wards and your representation of your wards, and you each represent the views of people in our community that need to be expressed. So I really appreciate all the voices around the table very much.
I didn't prepare a speech, but I think that George and the mayor that you two have a lot in common, in that you're both really hard workers and thorough and dedicated, and I admire that. And I think I could never keep up with George and the depth that he goes to on every issue, but I appreciate it. And I appreciate when I see the emails that come to us, mayor and council. I don't answer all of those unless I know the person or it's a particular issue that I think I need to answer. I answer all that come to me, but I always think, well, the mayor will answer it, so I don't have to worry. And that's what happens. That I think, oh, she'll take care of that. And every place I go, the mayor is there. And I admire that. And I appreciate both of you, and I'll miss both of you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say on behalf of the staff, George and Mayor, for the last 8 years, it's actually been an extreme pleasure of ours to work with both of you. Both of you are very professional. The entire council is. You represent the community extremely well, and you make our job pleasant and fun to do. So thank you to both of you.
Okay, I think there's going to end the meeting, and I think there's cake somewhere.
Yeah, we won't be having beer, but there is cake. And I think is it upstairs? It's upstairs. We tried to do it here, but yeah.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you.